Hello everyone, Max here from Evidence-Based Football Manager. This is part 9 of my Football Manager training analysis video series. I actually uploaded this video a few days ago, but I found an error with the content, so I actually had to bring down the video like 2 hours after I uploaded it. So this is the amended version. Hopefully this one's going to be okay. And I appreciate those of you who pointed out the error to me regarding the previous video. In my previous video, I told you that I would be presenting a completed training schedule for FM22 in this video, but I'm sorry, I will have to break that promise. I felt that there were still some key pieces of the puzzle that were still missing, some important stones still left unturned, and I had to run some additional experiments to gather more information about training in Football Manager before I could start building my own custom training schedule. So today's video will be kind of like a summarized report on those additional experiments that I've been running these past few days. Again, apologies if you've been waiting for me to publish my training schedule, but I'm only delaying it because I'm trying to bring you a well-tested product that is rigorously tested and researched. So there were 4 types of experiments that I wanted to share with you today. Here are those 4 experiments. 1. How does training affect the physical conditions of your players? 2. How does training affect the tactical familiarity of your team? 3. What are the effects of placing players into the different training units? 4. What are the effects of individual training and how does it affect the growth of your players? I'm sure you would agree that these are important questions that do need to be answered when you're trying to build a training schedule in Football Manager. So let's start going over these experiments one by one. As always, I've included a summary at the end of the video, so do feel free to skip straight to the summary if you wish to do so. Okay, first of all, let's talk about how training affects the physical conditions of players in FM22. The experiment method for this one is pretty straightforward. So I'm in charge of Team A, which is it's a made-up team that I use for my Football Manager experiments. And I used the in-game editor to set the physical conditions of these players to 8,000. With physical conditions in Football Manager, 0 is the minimum value and 10,000 is the maximum value. So if the physical condition is 8,000, it means that the players have become slightly tired. Now, I get these players to engage in a variety of training sessions for a single day, and once those trainings are done, I come back and record the fitness levels of the players again. I'll go straight to the results. So I've recorded the physical conditions of the players here in an Excel spreadsheet after they've gone through the various types of training sessions. I won't read through all these numbers one by one because 1, it's going to be pretty boring, and 2, the actual amount of change in the physical conditions, it will depend on a variety of factors in the game, such as the intensity of training, the natural fitness attributes of your players, etc. So I'll just go through with you some general patterns that I picked up from these results. 1. Training slows down the recovery of your players after a match. You would think that this is kind of a no-brainer, but this is actually the part that I got wrong in the previous video that I uploaded a few days ago. So yeah, training does slow down the rate at which your players recover after a match, which I guess highlights the importance of giving your players a rest day after a match, especially if you have another match coming up in a few days. 2. The effect that training has on the physical conditions of your players is proportional to the number of training sessions that they have to go through. Let me just show you this bar graph here. So these bars, they represent the physical conditions of players after they've gone through different numbers of training sessions in a single day. So a higher value here, it means that the players are less tired, and a lower value here means that the players have become more tired. So as you can see, after going through one training session in a single day, the physical conditions of these players are the highest. After going through 2 training sessions in a single day, the players become a little bit more tired. And when they have to go through 3 sessions of training in a single day, the players become the most tired. So you can confirm here that how tired the players become in Football Manager is proportional to the amount of training that they have to do. 3. Natural fitness, which is one of the physical attributes of players in Football Manager, it affects how fast players recover after they've gone through training. Again, I have a bar graph here. Let's have a look at it together. So these dark brown bars are when the natural fitness attributes were set as 1 out of 20. These medium brown bars are when the natural fitness of the players were set as 10 out of 20. And these light brown bars are when natural fitness was set as 20 out of 20. So you can see that players with natural fitness of 20 out of 20 recovered the most amount after training, whereas players with 1 out of 20 natural fitness recovered the least amount after training. So yeah, natural fitness is what determines how fast players can recover after a match in Football Manager. 4. Different types of training sessions in FM22, they tire the players by different amounts. So here you can see I've recorded the physical conditions of players after I made them go through a variety of different training sessions. I didn't test all the available training sessions in FM22, but I did test the ones that showed promising results from my previous training analysis videos. So you can see most of these sessions, they affect the physical conditions of players by more or less similar amounts, except for maybe these ones, physical, resistance, and quickness sessions. Now, what do these 3 sessions have in common? If you've watched my previous videos, you'll remember that these sessions, physical, endurance, and quickness, they promote the growth of physical attributes of players in FM22. So you can tell that in FM22, training sessions that boost the physical attributes of players, they tend to make your players more tired. Also, you can see that I've subdivided these results into 4 different playing positions: goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and strikers. And with goalkeepers, it's a bit weird. So in some of these sessions, the goalkeepers become more tired compared to the outfield players. And in some of these sessions, the goalkeepers become less tired compared to the outfield players. Goalkeepers are just a bit strange in FM22. The way they grow and the way they respond to training is completely different from outfield players. That's sort of why I've largely avoided talking about goalkeepers in my training analysis video series. But if you have a look at the outfield players, the defenders, midfielders, and strikers, you can see that there's really not much difference between these different bars, which means that the outfield players in Football Manager, they are affected by more or less the same degree from training, regardless of their playing position. Now let's move on to the next experiment and talk about tactical familiarity. Tactical familiarity, or TF for short, it's a parameter that you can find here on the tactics page, and it's composed of 8 different components. So here it doesn't tell you the actual numerical values of TF, and it's just represented by these green bars. But if you use an external game editor, such as the Football Manager real-time editor that I use for my experiments, it's possible to view the actual precise numerical values of TF for your team. Playing a match or conducting a training session in Football Manager raises the TF of your team. Although the in-game descriptions for the training sessions aren't really accurate in terms of exactly which components of TF will grow in response to that training session. For example, if you have a look at the match preparation training sessions, they all say that they will raise the mentality and the tempo components of TF. But when I got my players to perform these training sessions for a few days, mentality and tempo did not show an increase in value. It's all very odd. So for the rest of this video, instead of breaking down TF into these 8 separate components, what I'll do is I'll just calculate the average of these 8 components and focus on how these average values change in response to training. So I did some experiments again using Leicester City, and I found that going through one football match in FM22 increases the average TF value of your team by about 0.6 points. Of course, this value will vary depending on what club you're managing the tactic that you're using for your team, and also how familiar your players already are with that tactic. But for now, I'll take the value of 0.6 as a reference point. I also made my Leicester City players go through a variety of training schedules to see how their TF levels change in response to training. So the different types of training sessions raised TF by various amounts, but out of all the training sessions in the game that I tested, the match preparation sessions, they were particularly effective in raising the TF values of your team. When players in my Leicester City squad, when they performed the 6 different types of match prep sessions in a single week, the TF levels of the team went up by 1.2 points, which is double the amount of the increment that they get from going through a football match. Having said that, guys, I don't think tactical familiarity should be a huge concern when you're trying to build a custom training schedule in Football Manager. Yes, some training sessions in Football Manager may be more effective than others in terms of boosting the tactical familiarity of your team. But in reality, when we play Football Manager, even if you introduce a brand new tactic for your team, by the time you've played about like a quarter or a third of the season, tactical familiarity usually maxes out by itself anyway. So when you're building your own custom training schedule, I reckon don't worry too much about trying to max out the TF of your team as fast as you can. The main goal for a custom training schedule, I reckon, should be maximizing the growth of your players, which I guess has been the main theme of these training analysis video series. Okay, moving on to the third topic that I wanted to cover today, training units. In FM22, you can allocate your players into 3 different types of training units: goalkeeping, attacking, and defending. You can move your players freely between the attacking and defending units anytime, but the goalkeeping unit is reserved only for the goalkeepers. My question here is whether there would be a difference in player growth depending on which training unit the players are allocated into. For example, if you have a look at the attacking wings session here, it says 60% of the session will be spent on the attacking unit, which makes you wonder whether the players will benefit more from this training session if they were allocated in the attacking unit. So I did an experiment to investigate the matter. You guys are familiar with the experimental method that I use. I use the game editor to create a set of clone players, and I get them to perform a single type of training for an entire season. So this time what I did was I handpicked a few different types of training sessions. Some of them prioritized the attacking unit, and some of them prioritized the defensive unit. And for each of these training sessions, what I did was I first allocated all players in the team into the attacking unit, and I get them to train for an entire season, and I recorded the growth of those players over the course of a season. After that, I move all players into the defensive unit. I get them to train for another season, and I recorded their growth again. That's happened over a season. And let's go straight to the results. Long story short, the range of player attributes that grow in response to training is the same, regardless of which training unit the players are allocated into, but the amount of growth is different. For example, we have the attacking wings session here. Remember, this is a session that has its main focus on the attacking unit. So when all players in the team were placed in the attacking unit, the amount of growth was 12 points, whereas when everyone was placed in the defensive unit, the amount of growth was 9 points. Of course, the actual amount of growth here will differ depending on various factors in the game, such as player professionalism, determination, the quality of the coaching staff, and so on. But the important thing here is that the amount of growth was greater when players were placed in the attacking unit compared to when they were placed in the defensive unit, which means the description for the attacking wings training session was, in fact, accurate. And it's the same story with the defensive unit. So let's have a look at this one here, the defensive engaged session. So this one apparently prioritizes the defensive unit. So with this session, When all players in the team were placed in the attacking unit, they grew on average by 10 points, whereas when everyone was placed in the defensive unit, they grew on average by 12 points. So again, the in-game description for this training session, the defensive engaged training session, it turned out to be accurate. How about a session that doesn't divide the players into the attacking and defensive units? So here we have the attacking training session, which contrary to what its name suggests, it involves all outfield players in the training session, and it doesn't prioritize either the attacking or the defensive unit. So here, when all players were placed in the attacking unit, they grew on average by 13 points, whereas when everyone was placed in the defensive unit, they grew on average by 13 points. So the players grew by more or less the same amounts, regardless of which training unit they were allocated into, which is again an accurate reflection of the description for the attacking training session. So I guess these results prove that training units do play a part in the development of players in Football Manager. With training sessions that prioritize the attacking unit, your players will grow more if they are allocated in the attacking unit. With training sessions that prioritize the defensive unit, players will grow more when they are placed in the defensive unit. And with training sessions that involve all outfield players at the same time, players will grow by equal amounts regardless of which training unit that they belong to. The problem here is that if I'm building a training schedule that's composed of a variety of a mixture of sessions, let's say some that prioritizes the attacking unit and some that prioritizes the defensive unit, you're not going to constantly move your entire squad back and forth between the attacking and the defensive unit just because you want to maximize the amount of growth your players get from those training sessions. I mean, I'm a massive min-max freak when it comes to playing games like Football Manager, but even I wouldn't go that far. So I guess what you can do, given the findings that I've shown you, is that if you're using a training schedule that's mostly composed of training sessions that prioritize the attacking unit, then yes, it would make sense to move all your players into the attacking unit and just leave them there for the whole season, and that will accelerate the growth of your players. And vice versa for the defensive unit. So if you're using a training schedule that mostly prioritizes the defensive unit, then yes, place all your players into the defensive unit, and that will speed up the growth of your players. But if your training schedule is a mixture of a variety of training sessions, then I think it's probably best just to distribute your players evenly between the attacking and the defending units. Okay, on to the final topic for today's video, individual training. Individual training is a huge topic in Football Manager. It's kind of an uncharted territory for me, and frankly, it's a topic that deserves a whole video or two dedicated solely to that topic. I did want to touch on that topic briefly here today because how individual training mechanic works in the game, it will have a bearing on how I build my custom training schedule. There are three main aspects to individual training in FM22. First is how you can manually set the playing positions of your players in the team. Second is the additional focus that you can assign to your players. And third is the player trait that you can either add or remove from the player. And it's the first aspect, playing position, that I wanted to explore in this video today. So in FM22, if you don't manually set the playing positions of your players, here in the training page, it will just be set as the default value, as you can see here. But you are able to manually instruct your players to start working on a different playing position should you wish to do so. I guess my question here is, if you manually change the playing positions of your players here in the training page, would that sort of change the way that the players grow in response to training? So to answer this question, I ran some additional experiments. The experimental method is the same as before, so using a team made of clone players, and I got them to perform a single type of training throughout the entire season. I ran one season when the playing positions of the players were set as their default values, one season when the playing positions of the players were set as central defender with a defend duty, one season when the playing positions were set as central midfielder with a support duty, and another season when they were set as advanced forward with an attack duty. I used the match practice sessions for this experiment because if you have a look at the in-game description for the match practice session, it says here that it will grow the attributes of the players according to their individual roles. So I wanted to see what happens to player growth when I set the playing positions of the players manually. Okay, let's have a look at the results. Long story short, guys, manually setting the playing positions of your players in FM22, it does change the range of attributes that grow in response to training. Although exactly how those changes occur is a bit of a mystery. For example, let's have a look at this table here. So this one is when the players in my experiments did match practice training throughout the entire season, and I've sort of broken down the results into these three groups of players in my team: defenders, midfielders, and strikers. But let's just focus on the midfielders for now. So when the playing positions of these midfielders were set as their default values, these are the attributes that showed growth after a season of training. And this is the range of attributes that grew when I set the playing positions of these midfielders as central defender with a defend duty. This is the range of attributes that grew when the playing positions of these midfielders were set as central midfielder with a support duty. And finally, this is the range of attributes that grew when the playing positions of these players were set as advanced forward with an attack duty. Now, clearly there is a difference in the range of attributes that grow as I change around the playing positions of these players. But those changes are not correlated with anything. They don't correlate with the player's original playing position. They don't correlate with the required attributes of the position that they're training as. It's just completely unpredictable, and I couldn't find any pattern as to exactly which attributes will grow when I manually change the playing positions of these players. And because of this, I guess there's not much I can do to incorporate aspects of individual training into the way that I would build my own custom training schedule. So in my next video, when I start assembling my own training schedule, I will probably just leave individual training alone and leave these playing positions of the players as their default values. Okay, time to do our summary of today's findings. Here we go. 1. Training slows down the recovery of your players after a match. This effect is proportional to the amount of training that your players have to go through, and the speed of recovery is affected by the natural fitness attributes of your players. 2. Different types of training sessions in FM22 will tire your players by different amounts. Training sessions that boost the physical attributes of your players, such as physical, endurance, resistance, and quickness sessions, they make your players more tired compared to the other types of training sessions. 3. Tactical familiarity of your team builds up slowly over time in response to match exposure and training. Match preparation training sessions are especially effective in building up the tactical familiarity of your team, although any other types of training sessions will eventually max out the tactical familiarity of your team given enough time. 4. Training unit is a mechanic in the game that works as intended. Training sessions that prioritize the attacking unit will benefit players more if those players are placed in the attacking unit, and training sessions that prioritize the defensive unit will benefit your players more if those players are placed in the defensive unit. In reality, however, you're not going to constantly move your players back and forth between the attacking and the defensive units, while you play the game. So it's probably best just to distribute your players evenly between the attacking and the defensive units. 5. Assigning the individual playing positions of your players in FM22 will change the range of attributes that grow in response to training, although that change is not correlated with the position that you've assigned to those players. Guys, a lot of you have asked me to share the results of my experiments online, which I am happy to do so. So I've uploaded my Excel file on Dropbox, as you can see here. And this file should be accessible for public viewing and downloading. I don't think you even need a Dropbox account to view this file online, which is pretty convenient. I'll post the link for this file in the description below, so do feel free to check out this Excel spreadsheet if you wish to do so. And from now on, I will update this Excel file regularly to include the results of my future Football Manager experiments. I want to give a quick shout out to Lucas, who is a graphics designer from Argentina. He's been making the thumbnails for my Football Manager videos recently that are very high quality. Lucas has an Instagram account where he posts samples of his works, so do check out his Instagram page. I'll add the link in the description below. Guys, again, apologies that my custom training schedule is being delayed, but it is a process that takes time. I just have to make sure that I've gathered all the essential ingredients before I can start building something that I can feel confident about. In the meantime, do feel free to leave lots of comments below and I will try to respond to them as much as I can. Alright guys, take care and I'll see you all next time.